Hello, hello, and welcome to the Color Whisperer Show. This is Jeanette Chasworth. I am a Color Whisperer, and I'm here to talk about all things home and healing. And we've got a big healing day coming up because we've got Devi back. So excited to have her back with us. She had lots of wonderful comments from before, so we brought her back. So let's go ahead and welcome Devi. And while we're doing that, I'm going to see if I can clean my screen. Welcome, Devi. So good to see you again.
Nice to be back this autumn.
Yay! It is autumn, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
My favorite time of year. All the leaves turn all my favorite colors.
Yeah, they're gorgeous, particularly in the mountains because you have the
Yes.
golden, yellows and the wine reds and the pumpkin oranges, and Mother Nature is just displaying this kaleidoscope of her colors. It's really quite beautiful.
It is. Have the leaves started turning up in the mountains?
Up in Big Bear, because it's colder, they've already
Oh,
started, and we're kind of getting what you would call that lime green yellow here down in Running Springs. So you can see that nature is shifting, right, her array.
that's awesome. We don't see it so much here because we just don't get cold enough. And we have a lot of palm trees and a lot more evergreen stuff, so we don't have a lot of trees that
Hmm.
turn colors. So
Hmm. Yeah, people drive up these mountains to kind of get, the beauty of the, seasonal changes that we know from back east.
yes.
Hmm.
All right. So we talked last time a lot about masculine and feminine. And I know you are going through some big stuff regarding that. So do we want to kind of start there and dive into, go a little bit deeper than we did last time and how these are related within ourselves and get into this big project that you're working on?
Be happy to, because it's October, the middle of October, and at the end of October, there are festivals, right, for these seasonal practices that are the ancestral holidays from cultures all over the planet, such as, All Hallows Eve and Dia de los Muertos and All Saints Day and Samhain, and it's also known as Ancestors Night. So this is the month where, quote unquote, the veils between the different dimensions are thinning, and we have more opportunity for communion and connection with what you would call the spirit world, and asking for guidance and support and assistance on how we can be our best selves, in this world and in this reality. And so they call it, the night of communing with the beloveds that have crossed over, or the time of the year where we come more into that silence and introspection. And as the leaves, right, are dropping and nature is preparing to go into winter, in that quietude, we can gain more clarity about what's going on inside of ourselves, both personally and professionally, and also how to honor our larger family, right? That just because somebody, quote unquote, dies, it doesn't mean that they've left our family. And oftentimes we can't resolve some of the issues that we had with our relatives while they're alive. And so sometimes we can only resolve some of these ancient male female conflicts when we work at the quote unquote problem through multiple levels of access. And it's like I've heard of really cathartic and profound healings happening for families, quote unquote, once grandpa or grandma or their aunt or their uncle or their mother or their father departs, right, and goes back into the luminous world. And then they drop what you would call that egoic personality. And then with mediumship, right, the communication on expanded levels, uh, there's an opportunity for reconciliation or realizations, or the opening of the heart and being able to say what we never got to say while we were still here because people were too shut down, whatever it is. So this male female healing process is not just limited to, this continuum, shall we say.
And what I've seen time and time and time and time again in my life, and I personally have seen a lot of death, but even with friends and going through deaths, friends, families going through death, there's always a gift. There's
Yeah.
always something that is revealed. And sometimes it's maybe you've got kids who, they're adult and they're still hanging out with, dad's paying all the bills, but now they got to step up. Or there's a truth that is revealed. When my mom died, there was a lot of truths that got revealed that would have never happened as long as she was living. And my dad was 12 years older than her. So like the odds were not in favor of her dying first.
Wow.
So, but those were truths that she never would have voiced. And I think some of the truths were, this is just what is. She didn't know, like, she'd been in the situation so long, she didn't know how much of it was really clouding things. And my dad, when he died, it was necessary for the rest of it. It was his time. He was well into his 80s, so it was his time. But his death was actually more useful to our growth than his living. And I mean,
Yeah.
it may sound like a cruel thing to say. It's not. It's just, it's an awareness of, this is, his time. He was done. He was done. And I've had friends tell me, oh, well, what if your dad was alive during COVID? My dad would have been gone the first few weeks of COVID because he couldn't handle staying in his house the whole time. That would have killed him. He would have died from depression like that. No question. But he was ready. He was in a time and this place where he's like, all the things that he wanted to live for were done.
Mm-hmm.
And the best gift that he could give us at that point was what needed to be done by him not being here.
Yes. And as we are familiar with other cultures, for the Egyptians or the Tibetans, this stage of transition is a very sacred window. So they look at it as two bookmarks, right? You have your arrival, dun, 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 welcome to planet Earth. And then you have all these amazing experiences, right, while you're here. And then there's this graduation. And then it's kind of like reflecting on, so what did you learn?
Right.
And you have beautiful souls and beautiful souls. I mean, you have beautiful movies like Disney Soul, right? And it talked about that incarnative process, of coming in to find that spark, that unique gift, that unique essence while you're here. And a lot of that is chosen. We call it, your intention or your primary dharma that you connect with before arrival. And then after departure, you kind of check in and go like, so how did, your expression or embodiment of that gift go while you were, here on the planet? So there's this whole streamline of consciousness. And so that's looking at, again, our bodies as a home while our spirit is residing here in this continuum, shall we say. Then there's all these movies now about, quantum time travel. So people are starting to pick up on the fact that really multidimensionality is just matter of fact these days for anybody who's, hip, shall we say. It's becoming more popular or hip to embrace a multidimensional frame of existence. And that's fun for us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You touched on something I just kind of want to go back to, because I heard the full legend of Dia de los Muertos. And it's really a beautiful one. And it's a connection with the ancestors, which I love. I mean, I still talk to my mom. I still talk to my dad. I mean, my grandma's come in. I mean, just like when I need help, I'm like, okay, guys, help me, and love doesn't die. It's still there.
Yeah.
And, All Saints Day, I think that these are some really beautiful holidays, but then we kind of distort it with Halloween. And why do we recognize, all these creepy characters when that's really not what the day is about? It's It's
Correct.
about our ancestors. So can you
Correct.
go into that a little bit?
Oh, now we're going to get into cultural transitions of what we used to have was the prevalence of more of the Condor nations, which is the feminine wisdom,
Okay.
the feminine practices, right, of communing with both nature and the expanded worlds, shall we say. And those are what you would call sacred feminine cultural values. And the more we started to see patriarchy, right, kind of bring its religious dogma, right, into modern times, the more they attempted to oppress or diminish or suppress those traditions that would keep us in that multidimensional heart, in that multidimensional love space, and wanting to make things very, you know, physical or concrete, or, the age of reason, right? Of going into the masculine mind, right? And kind of abandoning those feminine intuitions and those feminine sensitivities and those feminine mysticism and magic of being able to connect with the full beauty of life, which includes, frequencies of light that are no longer, physicalized. But the more that you moved into that, structure is the only thing that's real, reason is our highest value, and capitalism, right, developed, then you lost more of the balance, which is that fabric of appreciation and gratitude for the fullness of existence. And so it's kind of like when the patriarchal religions came in, they really tried to sever the spirit world, right, and matter for actually purposes of, just implementing their systems of control. And this is all documented by people like Maria Gimbutas and Joseph Campbell at Pacifica University, graduate studies, Dr. Rianne Eisler, Starhawk. We moved into this, age of de-evolution because these old ways were forgotten or poo-pooed or shunned because also of, the desecration of Native American culture.
Yeah.
And so if you're gonna,
And it's all done
steal
in the
people's
name of
lands, yeah, if you're gonna steal people's lands, then you don't want their practices being respected. If that translates, yeah.
and it was done. Oh, they're practicing evil stuff, and the age of reason. That's also kind of when the whole witch hunting began too. And we both know that was, a big hoax. It was, they were trying to steal land. They were just like somebody you didn't like, but it was women who did have a lot of intuition. It was women who were healers, and they weren't doing witchcraft. They were, but they were working with something that, wasn't easily controlled. It couldn't be easily explained. But I mean, today we're going back to some of that. We're going back to having more herbs. We're going back to more of those holistic approaches to things. And it's like the world's getting louder and louder saying, we want this, we want this, we want this. We've got Whole Foods. We want food that's not covered with crap. I mean, it's a simple little thing, but actually it's a big statement that Whole Foods has gotten so big because we're saying,
and sprouts and,
and
all
sprouts.
of the
Yeah.
natural foods, right?
Yeah. But we're saying, hey, no, wait, we're willing to pay more for you to give us stuff that's good. And we're going more holistic. And so
And
I think
bringing
that's
back the
fantastic.
healthy traditions that keep
Yeah.
us in harmony with the seasons and in harmony with the cycles of life.
Yes.
So in that great, beautiful wheel, like spring is when you arrive or when you're born, and then winter is when you cross and transition, and the great circle of life,
Yes.
And so we have the love and support of those that are walking with us here. And then we also have, the love and support of those that are dearly, right, departed. And then, my work is about the distinction between, so who are your true allies? Because we have, wounded or traumatized ancestors, which would not be beneficial allies. And then we have healthy or awakened ancestors, right? That lived more of the divine truth in their personal and work lives, where there wasn't a separation between, well, here's my prayerful practice or my meditation practice, and I'm going to keep that separate from, my commerce, right, or my marketplace. That was seen as a bizarre, compartmentalization that was unnatural. So I've talked about, sacred economics to a lot of people, sacred commerce, that these ancient traditions are quite real. And their fourth bottom line is actually love.
Yeah.
So there's no more competition. It's all about cooperation. And it's no more about I have to be the victor, right, in order to get my fair share, quote unquote, of the bounty at the expense of another, which is the models of competition. And so that masculine aggression template, right, has infected our food systems, our health systems, our relationship systems, right, and our economic systems. So when I'm talking about male-female balance, I'm not just talking about, your your attributes or your qualities of consciousness. It's also in what you would call social systems.
Absolutely. And, as an entrepreneur, that's been one of the things that I find is I have to spend a lot of time in my masculine, and we go networking with men. And, as a designer, I deal with a lot of men. So it's like I'm dealing with men. I'm having to be in that masculine and doing feminine business. That's like it's a stretch, and I get it up here, but I don't always get it in here. And
Well, think of it in terms of just the difference, right? Which is a monumental achievement. Am I thinking with my heart?
yeah,
Am I thinking with my soul? Or am I relating to my decisions and actions and choices only from pure cognition, right? And so most people are cut off in how they relate to business from the shoulders up. That
so
the sensitivity, right, of being able to see where there's mutual benefit, right? Like true principles of co-creation or co-participation, that's more of a feminine, holistic, right, skill set.
so what would you tell somebody? Because I mean, we all know plenty of entrepreneurs that truly are just cut off. So how do we enlighten that person who, like, well, this is the way business is done, right? Or we just have to, like, we just have to do more, and they'll kind of eventually fall in line as we change how business is done.
Well, if you go back to nature as an ecology or an ecosystem, there are multiple movements that are called regenerative economics. And nature is not going to harm one aspect of its ecosystem in order to get more or achieve more, right? Because of hubris or pride or ambition that would be very costly for another member of the ecosystem. So there's a misinterpretation of Darwinianism, right? That said it's a dog eat dog world. Actually, nature's far more intelligent than that. If nature actually went into the degree of the distortion and the imbalance, right, that we've seen humankind, it would, decimate the survivability of the entire ecosystem. So nature sustains a balance that most humans have ignored or overridden because of conditioning. And it all goes back to the family. Because if somebody didn't actually receive love and care and compassion growing up, they can't bring that same kind of kindness, right, to their other uh, activities, shall we say. And so a lot of people have just learned how to advocate for their own needs,
Yeah.
which is a form of narcissism. And they're not awake enough, right, or in that heart wisdom enough to see what you would call the ripple effect, or to see the consequences, as the Native Americans would say. Is this business decision actually going to be okay 7 generations from now? So regenerative economics, right, or the caring economy, that honors what we would call social wealth economic indicators. And that's that you put love and care and compassion and kindness inside of the energy, right, of how we choose our business activity through what Dr. Jacqueline Hobbs calls the bonds of affection.
That's so beautiful. I mean, if we all worked like that, I mean, what an incredible, beautiful world it would be, you know? Um,
And we did have it on the planet. There are documented ages. There was a golden age in Egypt with Queen Nefertiti and King Akhenaten, where you had the merchant priesthood. And people are like, what? If you're female, merchant priesthood. And it's all about core values. So you had your training, right, in these core values of respect and honor and integrity. And so a merchant priest wasn't just paying attention to the profitability of a financial transaction. It was like, is this transaction actually benefiting the heart of the community? Right? Am I bringing more of an exponential blessing to myself, right? To this other company, to the planet, right? And to next generations. So we're starting to see the movement of, social responsibility and quadruple bottom line, right? And people are including what we would call these other definitions of wealth, which is called like a happiness index. What's your gross happiness index? Not
because
your
it doesn't
gross natural
necessarily
product.
mean you've got $1 billion in the bank, you know? There's a story, you've probably heard it, but this tycoon goes up to this guy, he's on an island, he goes fishing all day, he has to work for his fish, and he lives in a hut, and he's like, well, you could do this, and why don't you buy a boat, and then you could have more fish, and then you could do this and you can do that, and at the very end he says, and what would I get when I do all these things? He says, well, then you could retire and you could sit in your house and go fishing when you want. And he's like, I'm already doing that. But that's this guy's happiness was, he didn't need to make $1 million. He didn't need to have the leg. Some people do. Some people need to do great things. There's a drive in them. They're so driven. They need to leave a mark somewhere. And other people are like, hey, you know what? I'm just living my day every day, and that's okay. And one of the things, I love what you were talking about, because one of the big things you hear in networking is givers gain, givers gain, givers gain, right? And I know you've done enough too, and I know there's a lot of other entrepreneurs out here who've heard all this stuff. And how many times have you give, and then like it's crickets coming back at you? I've been in good networking groups, I've been in bad networking groups. And it's like, wait a second, I'm giving. And you're not giving for something to be returned, but at some point the odds are supposed to come back, right? And I think it's Zig Ziglar that says you can get everything you want if you help enough other people get what they want. And there's a lot of truth to that, but this takes that to a whole deeper level. And it's not just, I'm going to sell you some ice because, I want you to buy some ice, and that's going to make your world better. But, you live in an igloo. So do you really need ice? But like, it's like, yes, I'm going to make your world better, but I'm not looking at just making it better for the minute. I'm looking at making it better for the whole. And I love it for 7 generations. I can't even think that far ahead. I don't have any kids. That makes it harder, but like still, I can't think 7 we're talking 200 years from now. What's it going to be in 200 years? That's amazing.
So if people can imagine a quadrant now, if you start observing your family system and yourself, we have healthy masculinity on the planet, and we have unhealthy masculinity on the planet. We have healthy femininity on the planet and unhealthy femininity on the planet. And that emotional intelligence that is the heartbeat of sacred commerce is healthy femininity and healthy masculinity. The feminine heart, right, would like to see a beneficial outcome, right, for every area of the village, so we say. And the healthy masculinity is caring about the guardianship of these core value principles in what you would call the feel good nature of the relations. So, business, first and foremost, from the heart, is about relationship. And all my relations are homotakwiasan. So, it's realizing if I have a win, quadruple bottom line 5 years ago, I've just fed the heart of the community, right? And that wealth of that trust, that wealth of that camaraderie, that wealth of that generosity keeps things balanced, right? Because when you have a really good experience with somebody, you want to make sure that they're also being taken care of, right? And so we move out of this nucleus of, only caring for your physical progeny, right? Like if I'm a wealthy merchant, I just want to see my children get wealthy, and I don't care, right, where anybody else ranks on the totem pole. That's not that organic social fabric that basically says, how can we best share our gifts and services, right, or products, or talents, or skills in a way that brings more beauty, truth, and goodness into the world? If that's your indicator of what you'd like to offer life through your storefront, then you're opening up like this heart lens of like, oh my gosh, I get this creative inspiration, which is the genius, right, of this innovation, which is that divine feminine intuition. The masculine is then how do I implement that and roll that out in a way that takes care of my needs, but also takes care of the needs of the community. And patriarchy did not have those values. Patriarchy was like, I will use you to get what I want. And if you're not smart enough, to watch your own back, then, sucker. It's not a deliberate, aggressive mindset, but I have seen many, many quote unquote spiritual men and spiritual women manipulate to get what they want because they're still in survival consciousness, whether they're willing to admit it to themselves because their inner male female is out of balance. You have a balanced inner male and female, you can't do somebody else harm. I will say that 2 more times. If your inner male and female inside of your body, mind, heart, and soul are balanced, you can't do another human being harm. You can't get ahead at somebody else's expense. It just doesn't work because your inner feminine would go like, oh, that's not being respectful of what would, co-create happiness for them as well. The sacred feminine would never be able to override somebody else's requirements just because somebody has this ambition, right, to make more of a mark on the world, which is more of that egoic identity and agenda. So this male female balance thing is huge because it starts that deprogramming process of where did I pick up some really bad habits from my parents, right? Which has nothing to do with these universal core values. And the longevity of healthy civilization requires beauty, truth, and goodness to be the bedrock of, your social structures. And we've lost touch with that because we went into the great masculine imbalance. The first shamans were females, right? There's this void in our culture now for that level of mysticism and magic, which just kept relations way more healthy and balanced because it was based on love's principles, right? Not, I must take care of myself without regard for the consequences to others. And it's gotten so indoctrinated, people are behaving as narcissists and they can't even see it.
No. The best networking group I was ever in was all women. And because we really did care for each other. When I went in there,
Mhm.
I was working for Closet World, and the lady who brought me in was like, Jeanette, come do this, come do this. And I'd never heard of a networking group. I didn't know what I was doing. But I got there and they're like, Jeanette, you're better than this. You want to design houses. Why are you doing this? And for me, it was an intermediator step between, okay, I've been working for somebody and am I ready to go out on my own? And so it was a stepping point for me from the day I took the job. But it was their encouragement, and literally, like, they got me half my business that first year. And just like, hey,
There you go.
it wasn't a huge amount of business, but they were referring me and they're like,
Yep.
Jeanette, you need to do this. This is like, they made it. It wasn't that it was unclear for me. I knew it was on my path, but they just like, you need to do this now. And they stood supported me. And I'll never forget, we had a lady come in one time and she's like, she was in her 40s and she's like, I need to start my own business. I don't know what I want to be. Okay. Now, I guarantee you, most networking groups, that person would have left and like, that would have been it, right? So one of our ladies, who was really an amazing lady, went up to her afterwards, said, let's go have lunch. And they had lunch. They had a really long talk. And the next week, that lady was back and she had a business that she was starting. And it's that kind of like, hey, look, we're not in competition. We're here to help each other. And I don't see that in the groups that have men in them. With the men, it's like, gimme, 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 gimme. Oh, I'll give you a little bit over here. I'll give you a little bit over there. Well, you grease my wheel, I'll grease yours. But like the men don't do that the way women do. At least that's my experience.
Predominantly, I don't want to, typecast or, compartmentalize, what you would call gender assumptions. And so what we're seeing is that there are men out there that are reclaiming their divine feminine.
There are some good ones. Yes,
And
absolutely.
there are women out there who are claiming their divine masculine as well. So it's not gender specific, so that we have the best of these principles, nurturing and supporting the highest possible collaborations. So, one of the masculine attributes is, that capacity to be super focused and extremely present, which is a gesture of love and respect, right? So a lot of females are sometimes way out of their bodies, right? Which is why they don't get practical things accomplished, right? Because they're just too much on the sway of their emotions, right? Or just going with the flow of things, right? And so that divine masculine specified, right? Structural divine presence is so helpful in getting anything actually productive accomplished, right? And then this feminine emotional wisdom, right, can tune in to what people aren't actually saying, right? Where they might actually be stuck, right? Or struggling and, maybe not able to engage in a manner that would really bring them great benefit if they had that encouragement. So a lot of times, men can learn a lot from their inner feminine muse that has that emotional intelligence to see, oh, well, this is a great opportunity, but we really kind of need to finesse, these 5 areas that are kind of, stuck for, whatever reason. And if you can massage that out, right, with your emotional intelligence, then you can really start opening up into places where people allow themselves to have more success, where people allow themselves, right, to have more prosperity, because then they know they're worthy of it or they deserve it, right? And so it's kind of like There's a lot of feminine executives that don't have a lot of luck in love because they're trying to approach their romantic relationships the way they do their company, and they're like, I can get these great results in business, but I can't manifest, a boyfriend or a husband. And why is that? And it's because you know they are so um aggressive, right? And going after what they want, that they don't really allow that feminine allure, right? And that feminine softness and that feminine receptivity, right? Out that would attract a mate. So
Yeah.
I'm not talking about the men do this and the women do that and typecasting, because that's not honorable. However, we see men that have become extremely feminine, right? And the yogis with their little buns up on their head, and they're always in Zen meditation, and they don't keep their word. So a man is only as good as his bond. And so if you have a feminized, right, or demasculated, yogi, this is like hippie, right? Then he's not showing up with constancy. He's not showing up with reliability. And then he's more in his shadow feminine, even though he's, right, the gender is male. So do you see what I mean? We have these really successful executive females, and they're miserable and they're lonely because they haven't learned to trust, right? To let the man actually lead, or like in dancing, the masculine leads. They haven't learned to be in that feminine willingness to follow somebody else's lead. So the the exploration of this topic is pretty much endless. So, are there areas that you are most curious about that I can lend my expertise to help the listeners, shall we
Oh,
say?
Mark has a question.
I did, and I was actually in another session, and they were actually talking about the notion of stereotypes and a number of things along those lines, because they were actually talking about how sometimes women aren't given the respect that they need to get because they are going into a man's world, quote unquote, in that business lane and all along those lines. And I've also heard a lot of times people talk about toxic masculinity and all along those lines. I think there might be another version of toxic femininity, but definitely there is toxic masculinity and all along those lines. So I was just wondering, Reverend Devi, if you could talk a little bit about those notions, and also what me and actually Janine were talking about earlier, which is this notion of victim mentality, because I do think that that is something that goes on in a lot of our conversations as well. So I'd love to hear some of your thoughts around that, because I was telling Janine, I definitely don't want to say that you can't do something because you have got these different stereotypes, be it handicapped or being a certain race and everything. But I also think that we have to have a little bit of our history, and that's what I was telling Janine, and accepted that as part of our generational things that we get that are part of our generational development, because we have a generational soul that goes from our life here on this planet to the next life and all along those lines. But I'd love to hear some of your thoughts, because I'm hearing a lot of people, even in this latest conflict in the world, so these latest conflicts, talking about victim mentality. And I think that sometimes we are doing a disservice to some of the people that may actually be the victim of what's going on. I'd like to
Yes.
hear some of your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, basically, when we go back to the end of October, right, around the ancestral family tree of life, a lot of what you would call toxic masculinity and toxic femininity is nothing more than an ancient ancestral wound. When you have a breakdown in the family unit where, mom and dad have some kind of a split or a schism, and you don't see that nucleus being upheld with a mutuality of respect and a mutuality of love, it does pass down generation after generation. And one of the prevalent archetypal splits that we've seen is oppressor oppressed, right? Or victim victimizer. So when the male female energy goes out of balance, right, then you can have a split called predator prey. And all warfare, right, is oppressor oppressed, patterns of domination structures, which is some form of a rupture of the sacred balance between the original divine masculine and divine feminine templates, right? Which is a huge long list of core values. What makes up the divine feminine is all of these different qualities of noble consciousness, and what makes up the divine masculine is all of these, extensive, right, attributes of consciousness. And victim mindset or victim programming comes from repetitive traumatic experiences, right? Where you have the winner and the loser, right? Playing itself out. And so that's what we've stepped into, gross imbalances of power. And that is a survival skill set. People somehow, right, go through some kind of a wound, and they either attempt to get their needs met through overpowering somebody else, or in that wound, right, they go into what you would call a collapse or some form of submission, which is the dichotomy of enslavement, right? The slave is seen as the one that is, stripped of their rights, and the slave owner, right, is wealthy enough, quote unquote, to have that additional assistance, basically, with horrendous leveraging of the odds in their favor. And so we have warfare, right, on the planet, and slavery on the planet. And if that's gone on for thousands and thousands of years, that's going to create a lot of ancestral trauma. So, one of the things that I saw in, I guess it was the Outlander, right, TV series, because the heroine was from the future, right, and she's traveling back in time to these plantations where slavery was just accepted. And she was this divine feminine, right, reverence for the sovereignty of life. And she was like, I'm not going to participate, right, in this paradigm of owning another human being for my financial gain. Like, not happening, right? But it's fascinating to see how, this timeline is not okay with slavery, and this stage of human development just accepts it as a cultural norm, and that happened as a result of just a lot of warfare, where the winner of those conflicts took slaves. And so there's not a whole lot of, acknowledgement of these principles of sovereignty and liberation and freedom, not just for the haves, right? The have-nots, right, go without because people assume that social hierarchy is just, the way it is. And that social hierarchy was leveraged through thousands of years of warfare.
Yeah. Hey, Reverend Daphne, along those same lines, how can we get out of this notion of sometimes being identified by our entities and by our material things? I know a number of people, and I can even say that I've been guilty of it, that will identify according to where they live or according to who their spouse is or who their significant other is, and a number of other things that are very much kind of materialistic. And all along those lines, because I do know that there are a number of folks that will, think that they are dating the athlete, they will identify that way. If they are living in a certain house, they will identify that way. If they are driving a certain fancy car, they will identify that way. And I think there's a lot of that kind of identity politics that goes on as well. But I'd love to hear your thoughts around that and how we can get out of that problematic thing. Because I think too often we don't see the beauty of people.
Welcome to the paradigm of conscious conception. Imagine children being brought into this world who have parents that honor the truth of the soul. If you have parents, right, that are conceiving you of, we're so happy to receive your soul to this planet, and that your soul has a mission, and that your soul has, a higher life purpose, and your parents relate to you through that lens of your value, your intrinsic value, right, as from the truth of your soul, then you don't need some external artificial reinforcement of, quote unquote, your worth being reflected back to you through materialism. People have all of these external, like, needs for, all of these status markers because they don't actually have enough self-love to know that they are worthy just for who they be, right? So it's a lack of self-esteem and it's a lack of healthy self-regard that my possessions do not indicate, right? The magnitude of my indwelling spirit and the wealth of my soul and the wealth of my loving connections in the world and my natural, God, goddess, creator given abilities and the prosperity and the abundance of my community relations and the network of the loving fabric of friendships, and that I've been given these gifts, and it's a joy and an honor and a privilege to make a difference in the world because I've been bestowed with this wealth of these abilities. And what creation or God or source has given me, just so happy to give back to life itself as a gesture of acknowledgement of my gratitude to the outpouring of lavish, loving care, right, from that loving source. So when people have a break in their connection with their source line, then they get really stuck, right? And these horizontal like artifices that is attempting to fill that void of just basic self-respect, that they didn't learn how to see themselves through the eyes of heaven. And if you don't know who you are through the eyes of the divine, then you're going to look for external accomplishments to fill that emptiness, unfortunately. And nobody's, willingly attempting to get the boat and get the jet ski and get the cabin and get the Mercedes. See, I did great. You can see the little kid just wanting the little stars, A plus in school. Did I win at the game of life? Am I good enough now? And so there's this tenacious, negative, we call them miasm, of not enoughness. And if somebody feels like they're not enough, you can't fill that emptiness with enough toys, right? Or possessions or business deals. And so that's why you have the Ebenezer Scrooges. They're so wealthy and yet they're so bankrupt, right? Of that inner light of like, I'm wealthy in, the bounty of my consciousness. It wasn't taught, like you're whole and complete, my child. We love you. We see you. You're brought here as a gift from the heavens. And how can we support you, to be your best self, not what you accomplish. And that's all indoctrination and conditioning. And thank you for seeing it.
With that.
You're ready to turn not everyone sees it.
You and Jeanette, always interesting questions for you, Reverend Debbie, and everything. But definitely that's where I was going in this particular conversation. But I'm going to turn it back over to the two of you. But I hope you didn't mind my little bit of a insights as well. So I'm going to turn it back over to the two of you.
Yes. Well, we appreciate, right, your masculine inquiry, your masculine comments. It makes things a lot of fun for Jeanette and I to have your wisdom also, right?
Absolutely. You know what, Devi, like an hour's just gone like that again. So it went by really fast. We can have you come on again another time. That would be awesome. There's so much to unpack here, but I want you to give yourself a plug. And how can people reach you and work with you or learn more about all of this?
Well, I'll seed, right, the good news that, Jeanette and I really do make a good team, and we love this platform. And so we're envisioning to really offer our combined gifts at least once a month. So this, tradition of, all three of us coming together every lunar cycle is something that we're really excited to provide for everyone. And that's to see also Jeanette's awesomeness succeed in her highest expression. And so I'm over here, right? My nest is called the Divine Union Foundation and the Divine Union Academy. I really specialize in helping, couples, organizations, and businesses come into this new earth paradigm, right? Where it's really a leadership conversation of embodying these, ancient wisdoms for modern times and the values and the virtues of love-based family systems, love-based social systems, and also assisting people in how they can self-actualize that embodiment of their destiny, their dharma, their life purpose. So the Divine Union Academy is a .com, the Divine Union Foundation is a .org, and then I'm both Speaking Tree of Life and Divine Union Foundation over on Facebook land.
Yeah, I still got a few more minutes because we actually started late, but we're
Oh,
going about maybe another 7 minutes or so along those lines. Because then I did have a quick question. It was actually based on a conference that I was part of earlier today, and they had a very interesting quote, and I'd love to hear your thoughts around this, Reverend Debbie. They said that the world has been, and I quote, brainwashed to think outward versus inward, and I think that they might have had a very valid point in that kind of line. But I was wondering your thoughts because that was a social worker, because like I was telling Jeanette, I was having some friends with a social work conference, and that was actually a social worker that had that quote in their comments, and they were making it. And I think it's a very powerful quote. I'd love to hear your thoughts around that.
Yes, we'll see in this broadcast, right? What Jeanette and I keep talking about, this is soul-based living, right? And we have these terms called a human identity or human personality. That's more in what you would call matrix reality, and that's more external focused. So if you're sitting in contemplation and meditation every single day and tuning in, right, to the inner voice of your heart and the deepest wisdom of your soul, you're going to show up in life, right, in that synchronicity and in that intuitive flow state. Those that are more externally focused, they don't take the time, right, to go within. They don't have those spiritual.
uh-oh. She's in the mountains, so something happened. Hopefully it's just momentary, but obviously we've got a glitch in the wonderful interwebs, aren't they lovely? Gotta love technology.
Gotta love technology. She froze over there for some reason and all along
Yeah,
those lines,
she's
but that was on
frozen.
her side and everything. But you're definitely dropping some gems as always, and all along those lines. Yeah, it might have been the internet and technology. It does happen sometimes.
And I mean, I think really what she's getting at is it's really more about coming from the heart, really being heart centered and how we look at things. And it's not just what's good for me. What really struck me with everything she said is it's not just good for me, it's not just good for the community. Is this going to be good for the community in 200 years? And that's, I mean, like, look at Gates, look at Bezos. These are the people that we respect as businessmen because they've done so much. What's the Microsoft, the Apple guy? What's his name? I can't remember right now. But like we have, they've created empires. And, I've heard about people who they've got shops on Amazon and like Amazon purposely tried to undercut them. So she just sent me a text. Let's see. Laptop power went out, coming back with internet lost signal. Okay. So, um, but like, what if instead of like trying to get more, I was like, how many, this thing was a diaper company that they pushed out of business. How many babies are being born? Like, really, there's plenty of work for everybody. That's the wonderful thing when you know a good networker, a good business person, because they're always saying there's more than enough work for everybody. We don't have to fight each other for it. There's more than enough work for everybody. That's the key element.
Oh, I love what Jeanette's saying, right? Spot on. So, sorry, my internet went out. So we're back, and yes, that's truth. Every.
Okay. So we do have just a few minutes left. We're not like going to get shut off. But is there any final words you want to say? Is there any something that?
Well, I would love to highlight what you just said, right? Because we always, weave with each other.
Yes.
The principle of lack and limitation and scarcity, right, is an artificial illusion of separation. So we're moving out of lack, out of limitation, out of scarcity, Okay, that's a victim mindset. And into plenty, abundance, and bounty, because it's the heart set and the mindset and the soul set that knows that my needs are being provided for by the great, mother, father, creative source energy field. And that in this belief system, healthy belief system, that all needs can and are provided for by benevolent, loving principles of, unified consciousness. What we're describing here in a nutshell is moving out of separation consciousness and into unity consciousness, right? Where all the businesses actually comprehend that they can thrive, right? And flourish together. You have to have that framework of that realization that there's more than enough. And so there's the Soul of Money Institute, and she talks about the models of sufficiency, which is, heart-based mindsets, heart sets, soul sets for, what's your life cosmology? What's your fundamental assumptions about enoughness and plentitude? And have you awakened to that love inside of yourself in order to see that reflected in the dynamics of what you would call your social framework for everybody can succeed together. And that's kind of like the golden rule. So as we come into fall and all the leaves are turning golden, what Jeanette and I are talking about today, is how do you bring this golden rule, right, into your professional relations? If you know it's possible as a leadership principle, then you can go about bringing this positivity into the world. One must accept the fundamental platform that this is truly possible and move out of those old myths of compartmentalization,
Yes.
right? Of only keeping the affluence, quote unquote, in the hands of the 2%, which then creates those other distortions. So there's more than enough for all of us to succeed. And if we all accepted that as a divine truth in our practical lives, you're going to see the opportunities that just spontaneously present themselves to, quote unquote, magically, right, develop for us. So we must claim it. That's moving out of that victim mentality and into the victor of like, consciousness is providing for all of us. So let's just lean into that scenario and see how we're guided to then co-generate that in cooperation. Dun, da, da, da. Way more fun, right?
So beautiful. It's so beautiful. And I mean, I know in my world, as a designer, there's always other people involved in the project. And I've always said, hey, when we work together, we can keep each other afloat during the hard times.
Yes. That's the
2008
backbone.
In 2008, I was getting phone calls every day. Hey, I build cabinets. Hey, I lay floors. Hey, I can help you. I can help you. I can help you. I said, really? That's awesome. What can you do? Well, I can do this for your clients. And 2008, so the design world used to really defend its designers. And in 2008, that all went away. If you went into a design center before 2008 and you weren't a designer, you weren't getting any breaks. Many people would have said, you can come in, look, you can't buy, you need to go find a designer. They stuck by their designers. In 2008, that all fell apart. And then the internet exploded and you can buy stuff on there's people selling stuff. And so they don't need us as much. And the vendors, a lot of the showrooms got really scared and they're like, well, we just need to sell something to anybody. And they didn't care. And in the past, if it was found out that you were selling stuff to clients at the designer price, that word would get around and you wouldn't get any designers in there. And like all that disappeared. And it was really amazing to watch this wonderful network fall apart. And you've got all the cabinet guys like, oh, I need work. They're calling me. And I was like, well, wait a second. would you, and I said, you know what, I would love to build a relationship with somebody where I can help you design stuff as well. Would you be interested in that? And would you be willing to give me referrals as well? Every single time I asked that question, it was just click, because I didn't have any clients. So they wanted to help me, but they didn't see how they wanted to help me by me
Reciprocate.
giving them business, but they couldn't see the other way around. It was just, and the design world is, because, right now, there's a big retail company that wants to really do a lot of work with ASID, the American Society of Interior Designers. I was like, you're taking our clients away from us. Why do you think we want to help you? The part of our industry that we make a lot of money on, and they've made it more accessible to the public. They're making tons of money. They're not cheaper than us, but they've got bigger buying power, so they can do all the big ads and everything, whereas a little designer doesn't have that ability. So then when people think, oh, I need XYZ, oh, I'm going there. So it's really, and then they're the first ones when the economy's down. Oh, hey, how can we help you? Like, you're not helping me. So it's really got to be a combination of, hey, look, I want to come in. Will you come in and design this cabinet for me? Will you come in and design these drapes for me? Like, let's collaborate, and then we can do 10 times more.
Times more together. Togetherness. Yeah.
And it's so powerful. And I have had a few relationships like that in my career, and it's wonderful. And it's kind of like, it's like a good marriage,
Yeah, that's it.
It really is. I mean, like, there's the masculine and feminine, and we're not supposed to be like this. We're not supposed to be the same. It's supposed to be like cogs of a wheel, and we keep the wheel going. We fill in the empty spaces, and we keep that wheel turning and turning. And that way, it doesn't matter what goes on, you can still keep the wheel turning if you work together.
The togetherness and the camaraderie ship.
Yeah.
And that's the restoration of a lot of these ancestral cultural core values of common unity. Community is common unity, and unity consciousness, right, is really going to look for how can we be of mutual benefit for real, not as an idea, right?
Absolutely.
And so that's the embodiment. So the more of our life force that we have swimming through our bodies, right, chi flow, then the more we're connected to the rivers of divine energy that also flows through the natural world. And then if you have those kinds of spiritual gifts, you can see where that love energy is weaving through those collaborative networks, right? And then the planet, you have the ley lines and the grids, right? And the meridians of our bodies. Well, you also have these love circuits, right? In really sitting down, being present with somebody and having those kinds of discussions, like you were saying. Well, how amazing that, I could do this for you, and let's see where you can also bring mutual blessings to, my endeavors, and how we can be in mutual co-empowerment. And if it's not mutual co-empowerment, it doesn't constitute, right, sacred economics. So there, right there, number one, mutual co-empowerment. That's the only way you're going to have a sacred marketplace.
I love it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, let's go to somebody now who does believe. I don't know her personally. We haven't had the conversation yet. But Color Marketing says she believes in sacred karmas because she's looking at making us all healthier with her wonderful spices. So, Mark, shall we get some Kendu spices going? And
you know how people love to enjoy food and don't understand how to flavor their food or how to replicate a meal? They're interested in supplements, but don't know where to begin? Well, what I do is I take the guesswork out of enjoying flavor and wellness with my flavorful spice blends so that they can create delicious meals with healing benefits. Kendu Spice was created to help cooks at any level enjoy healing through food. Every spice blend was designed to give added health benefits of natural herbs. Every blend is complete, There's no need to add any additional spice for a delicious meal. Saving you time and money while adding supplements to your meals can be both tasty and fun. My earliest memories in the kitchen began with my father, Kenny Can Do Bond, so it was fitting that I would name this line after him. I have always looked to natural remedies to supplement the body, and I found myself hiding herbs and minerals in foods for my family. That's when it hit me. Everyone needs Can Do Spice. Everyone should be having this. It's an exclusive brand for cooks at any level who want to create flavorful dishes with healing benefits that can satisfy the body and soul. Add a little spice to your life. Give Can Do Spice a try.